For the first Tipperary's Hidden History of 2026, my friend Dr. Conor returns to the townland where he spent much of his childhood. And in doing so, he returns to one of his favourite themes. The murder outlined in this month's episode was not the result of any agrarian or political dispute. Instead, it's the story of a young farmer's descent into madness where he committed the ultimate act of domestic violence.
Because a violent death took place in 19th century Ireland did not mean that this was an agrarian killing. The archives of Tipperary's hidden history document the county and the country's violent past, and much of this was indeed connected to the difficult relationship between the Irish people and those who owned the land upon which they attempted to survive and thrive. The story we outline this month is not one of those tales. This is purely a case of human failing. A bad person with a proven track record of violence who decides to take the life of the person who should have been his nearest and dearest. This is nothing less than the ultimate act of domestic violence. During the third week of October 1870, a deep sense of shock settled over the townland of Carrigatogher and the wider Nenagh district. Word began to spread of a crime so brutal that even seasoned police officers and magistrates struggled to comprehend it. A young woman, Mary, a wife and mother of 6 children, had been murdered close to her home at Mount Sack. Her body was discovered lying in a ditch near the house. The condition in which she was found was horrifying. Contemporary reports describe her skull as being frightfully smashed, with blood pooling beneath her head and clear evidence that she had been struck repeatedly. There was no mistaking the savagery of the attack. The alarm was quickly raised and the police arrived to make inquiries. Almost immediately, suspicion focused on one man, 37-year-old William, Mary's husband. Even before his disappearance became known, the local constabulary had information suggesting that all was not well within the household. Local newspapers painted a disturbing picture. William was described as a fine-looking young man and a comfortable farmer holding land on the estate of Captain Finch. But beneath that outward respectability, it was said that he had grown increasingly sullen in recent times. The cause, according to those who knew him, was an obsessive jealousy, a conviction that his wife was being unfaithful. Crucially, this was a belief shared by no one but himself. On the night of the murder, it was alleged that under some pretext, William persuaded his wife to leave the house with him. Before doing so, he locked their young children inside, ensuring that they could not follow or raise the alarm. The pretext was that he needed her to accompany him to bring in a dead calf from the fields. So he brought Mary to a lonely spot in the field, and this was a place where her cries would not be heard. What happened next could only be reconstructed from the condition of Mary's body and the marks on the ground. It appeared that Mary was first felled with a stone, before her husband proceeded to beat her skull with further stones until she was dead. The brutality of the attack sent waves of fear and revulsion throughout Carrigatogher and the wider district. While there was universal sympathy for the murdered woman, opinion was divided on the state of mind of her husband. Many believed that William had been unhinged for some time, his jealousy sliding into something darker and more dangerous. An inquest was arranged and the coroner, Michael Marr, was notified. Meanwhile, William was nowhere to be found. The case would come before the courts the following spring. On Tuesday, the 7th of March 1871, William was formally arraigned at Nenagh, charged with the willful murder of his wife Mary on the night of the 21st of October 1870. He pleaded not guilty. This was not William's first time before a court accused of a crime against his wife. Opening the case for the prosecution, Mr. Harris, QC, told the jury that it was one of the most painful cases ever to come before a Nenagh court. He acknowledged the heavy responsibility resting on the jurors, reminding them that their verdict would determine whether the man before them would be handed over to the public executioner. The prosecution's case, he said, would rest largely on circumstantial evidence, but evidence that was clear, consistent and compelling. The Crown believed that once the facts were heard, the jury would have little difficulty in reaching a verdict. The court was first taken through the geography of the area. Constable William Hicks and the county surveyor A.H. Crawford explained the location of the home, the surrounding lanes and the place where Mary's body had been found. A map was produced to help the jury visualise the movements described by witnesses. One of the earliest witnesses was Michael Hurley, who recalled seeing William on the afternoon of Friday the 21st of October. William had been travelling from Nenagh towards Portrue and had asked Hurley how best to cross the Tullis River. Hurley pointed out the route that would lead him home. William, he said, appeared sober and calm. James Ryan, a cousin of the accused, testified he saw William later that night between 8 and 9 o'clock in the company of his brother Michael. They stayed only briefly before leaving again. Under cross-examination, Ryan admitted that William had been jealous for several years, though he himself did not believe there was any basis for it. Then came the testimony that silenced the courtroom. Two of William's children were called to give evidence, a moment that moved many present to tears. Honora, just 8 years old, was carefully questioned to establish that she understood the difference between truth and falsehood. She told the court that she had been taught that telling lies would send her to hell. In her evidence, she recalled the night her parents left the house together. Her father had come home and asked her mother whether she had seen the young fella that day. He then claimed there was a sheep or animal dead and he asked Mary to come out and show him. Before leaving, he bolted the door from the outside, trapping the children inside. Honora never saw her mother alive again. Her older sister Bridget corroborated much of this account. She described how her mother had urged her father to wait until morning, fearing that he would be searching for livestock in the dark. Nevertheless, Mary went with him. When William returned, Bridget noticed something chilling. The stick he had taken with him was gone. Neighbours soon became involved. Bridget Ryan described going to the house the following morning and finding the children locked inside. Other women, including Maria Corney, spoke of discovering Mary's body lying in a ditch nearly 50 perches from the house. A child's shoe was found nearby in the mud. Police officers testified to the injuries observed on the body, while medical witnesses provided grim detail. Dr. McHugh, who carried out the post-mortem examination on the 31st of October, described multiple fractures to the skull, several facial injuries, and evidence that the scalp had been torn back. The wounds were consistent with blows from a heavy stick. Evidence was also given about William's movements in the days after the murder. Several witnesses described him arriving wet, frightened and agitated at their homes, asking to be hidden or taken in. Others recalled him speaking cryptically about a bad job that could not be helped. A significant portion of the defence case rested on William's mental state. Witness after witness described his obsessive jealousy, his belief that men were watching or approaching his wife, and his conviction that he was being mocked or betrayed. There was testimony that he had previously spent time in an asylum, and that attempts had been made by family members, neighbours, and even the parish priest to have him confined for his own safety and that of his wife. Father James Ryan, parish priest in the district before his transfer to Nenagh, spoke movingly of his efforts to reason with William. He stated unequivocally that Mary's character was beyond reproach. Despite repeated questioning, he was never able to produce a single fact to support his suspicions. Father Ryan admitted that he feared violence and had advised Mary to leave the house temporarily for her own protection. Despite this, no formal committal of William took place. After the close of evidence, the jury was addressed by counsel for both sides. The prosecution stressed that jealousy, however intense, did not excuse murder unless the accused was so insane that he did not understand the nature of his actions. The defence pleaded that William's mind had been unhinged for years. In his charge to the jury, Judge Keogh spoke with evident emotion. He described the crime as the greatest known to the law, the deliberate taking of human life, made all the more dreadful by the fact that the victim was the accused's wife, the person he was most bound to protect. After retiring for deliberation, the jury returned in about half an hour with a verdict of guilty, accompanied by a recommendation to mercy. Interestingly, it appears that the judge did not actually hear the recommendation to mercy, and it's not known whether anyone pointed this out to him before he passed sentence. William, when asked if he had anything to say, muttered a confused denial and spoke vaguely of grievances against his wife's relatives. Judge Keogh, visibly shaken, then donned the black cap and passed the sentence of death. The execution was set for Wednesday morning, the 26th of April, 1871, to be carried out within the walls of the prison. Throughout the long trial, William had shown little emotion, even when his own children gave evidence. But as he was being led away, heavy sighs were heard from the dock. In the courtroom, some of his female relatives broke down completely, while others fainted. With that, the court was cleared, and one of the most disturbing cases to be heard in a Nenagh courtroom for many years came to its grim conclusion. As we have learned from the account of the events outlined in this episode, William had very few friends. His fate, as outlined by the judge, was certainly enough to raise emotion, pity, and fear among some in the court. Just days after the end of the trial, however, that handful of supporters could breathe a sigh of relief. The authorities at Nenagh Jail received word from Dublin Castle that the Lord Lieutenant had commuted the death sentence on William. He would instead serve a sentence of penal servitude for life. In an indication of what those around him all his life might have been dealing with, apparently William reacted to the news with indifference and surprise. He was expecting a full and free pardon, holding on to the idea that he was justified in killing his wife. We end our story today several months before it began. Some 5 months before he murdered his wife of 8 years, William's behaviour escalated. Things had been bad for the past 3 years. He had been swinging pitchforks at his wife, razors over her head, accusing her of infidelity, chasing her around the house. On the 1st of May 1870, it was a Sunday, William ran at Mary, brandishing a stick and threatening to kill her and rake her under the ashes. Several days later in court, Mary expressed genuine fear of her husband. Her lawyer implored the judges to use their powers to protect Mary, lest she end up dead at the hands of her husband, something that had already happened in a recent high-profile case in Roscrea. When asked by the court if she felt in danger, Mary profoundly declared that she was in fear of her husband. She was in fear of her life. William told the court that he did not care whether he was sent to jail. He was ordered to procure the bail of 2 sureties for £10 and give his own recognizance of £20, that he would keep the peace for 2 years, or in default of finding securities, he would be detained in custody for 6 months. Like too many women in modern Ireland, Mary was not listened to by the courts. Her tormentor received a token monetary slap on the wrist. 5 months later, she was dead by his hands. Had the authorities taken proper, credible action when it mattered, her tragic end would not have become part of Tipperary's hidden history.
The first hidden history of 2026, and we look forward to many, many more right throughout.